Okay, so let's dive right in. We're about to unpack a pretty complex and honestly fascinating theological argument from a text called The Mysterious Fourth Angel's Glory. It really pushes back on some common interpretations of Scripture, so we're going to break down its core ideas step by step. It all kicks off with a question that, a lot of people ask. Are the old biblical holy days and festivals just obsolete now? The common thinking is, yeah, they were fulfilled. They're not really for us anymore. But the source material we're looking at says, hold on, that view might be missing the entire point. And this quote, well, it gets right to the heart of what the text calls a major barrier. It's this idea that just won't go away. The thought that these ancient practices were only for one group of people and that their whole purpose, which was tied to animal sacrifices, just ended 2,000 years ago. The text basically says this is a huge misunderstanding. So let's jump into our first section and see how this argument builds. We're digging into what the source calls a persistent belief, one that it claims is a kind of blindness that has affected people for centuries, both then and now. Okay, so here's the crucial point. The text argues that when we dismiss these old rituals as just being done and finished, we're accidentally treating them like they were the real thing to begin with. The whole idea here is that they were never the ultimate reality. They were symbols, pointers to something way, way deeper. And that brings us perfectly to the next layer of this whole thing, moving from the ritual to the reality. This is where the text really starts to break down the difference between a symbol and the actual, real event that it represents. Now, I love this slide because it just lays out the core idea so clearly. On the left, you've got what the text calls the shadow, or the typical. Things like animal sacrifices and physical ceremonies. These were like living parables. But on the right, you have the reality, the big spiritual concepts they were pointing to all along. A real atonement, a truly purged conscience, and a future spiritual observance. All right, let's get into our third section because this is the absolute turning point of the entire argument. The text doesn't just stop at reinterpreting some old rituals. Oh no, it applies this exact same logic, shadow versus reality, to this single most central event in all of Christian theology. And this is where you really need to lean in, because the source is about to make its most radical, its most unconventional claim, the one idea that everything else is built on. There it is. Just let that sink in. The physical crucifixion, the actual human death on that cross, is being presented here not as the final, ultimate reality, but as a physical illustration, a symbol of a much deeper, unseen, and truly spiritual event. This is the big idea we're about to unpack. So, if the cross was the symbol, you have to be asking, what was the reality? And that brings us to the most mind-bending part of this explainer, what the text calls a salvation that has already been lived. Now, to even begin to grasp this, we need to understand this key definition from the source. It talks about an eternal spirit, a reality that exists outside of our normal linear time. This concept is the engine, the mechanism that allows for what the text claims happened next, the Messiah literally entering into the life of every single human being who has ever existed. So let's just walk through this process as the text lays it out. Step 1. Through this eternal spirit, all of humanity is placed in him. Step 2. He then lives out every single one of those lives, your life, my life, and faces every single temptation we ever would. Step 3, and this is the kicker. He conquers every single one of them. He makes the right choice every single time. And the result? Step 4. A perfect, finished righteousness is created, custom made for every person. The implication of this is just staggering. What this means, according to the source, is that a perfect version of your life with every single moral decision made correctly has already been lived out. A perfect record for you already exists and is available to you. Okay, let's move to our final section and see how all of this ties back to that mysterious title. We're looking at what the source calls the final glorious message. And here it is. The fourth angel's glory is defined by the text as the final, ultimate message of mercy for the whole world. And what is that message? It's the revelation of this very idea, that a finished, perfect righteousness was created for every single person through that real, spiritual sacrifice. So, to just quickly recap the incredible argument we've explored from this text. First, the ancient holy days, they were just symbols, like previews of the main event. Second, the physical cross itself was also a symbol, pointing to a much deeper spiritual reality. Third, that reality was a sacrifice where the messianic life lived out every human life perfectly. Fourth, this act created a finished righteousness that's available to everybody. And finally, getting this knowledge out there is what the text calls the fourth angel's glory. And we're going to end on this thought right here. The text presents a reality where a perfect life and a finished salvation are already secured for every single person. So the question it leaves us with is a really big one. If that's the case, what does it truly imply about the nature and maybe even the meaning of our own human choices?